Okay.
Okay. Hello, Alana. How do you pronounce your name just for everyone to know?
Alana Levinson.
Alana. I
Yeah.
thought I was getting it wrong. So, welcome, Alana. This is ScottieO, and we are here to talk about relationship repair and revitalization. Getting people's names right is an important part of building uh, connection with names. So,
It
Alana.
is, ScottieO. It
So,
is. Yeah.
yeah, well, let's introduce each other. Why don't you tell us? So I know you from working together in an abundance tribe, and I've been impressed with your skills at manage, like basically coaching people and helping them and mentoring them and helping them become the best business person they can be. And I love your big heart and your ability to really um, yeah, get in there and see things that need change. And you've personally helped me, I'm excited to continue working with you over the next few months to help us both expand our businesses and help the world become a better place. Do you want to share anything specific about yourself that let people know your background or et cetera?
Sure. Thanks, ScottieO. So yeah, I've been professionally coaching for almost 20 years. I've had a lot of different niches. I've worked in with entrepreneurs, I've worked in corporate, and mostly where I'm at now is working with entrepreneurs, leaders, and teams. And one of my favorite industries to work with is construction and really helping them up level, expand and grow their business, get up one digit and do it without burnout. So there's different ways to approach that and strategies and nuances. And yes, I can see things sometimes that other people can't see. So I love doing this kind of work.
So key to do it without burnout too. One of the big directions that I've been moving in personally and my company is how do people expand their abundance and wealth with health, and not have to sacrifice it. Because I was kind of taught you had to work hard and burn yourself out in order to get what you want, and that's not necessary. And in fact, I think it's counterproductive. And sometimes, well, not sometimes, I've noticed that the more I slow down and the more I'm like really present, the better I am in my health and the better I am in relationships. It's like I'd say that's one tip I'll just start out of the shoot is to just slow down, be present in the present moment. Some people are go, 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 and they're connecting with other people. They just like I used to be a bit of a bulldozer and just like I got to get to the goal. And if people were in the way, they just got crushed or whatever. And that's not how to do business. That's not how to do life. Yeah. So
No, I
yeah.
see people in terms of scheduling, right? Like prioritizing scheduling. Like I see them book meetings like back to back to back to back to back. They don't take any break in between, and then they don't realize that they're bringing into the next meeting any energy or anything that came up in the previous one. So right, so how do you give yourself that transition time or breathing space or to do things that you want to get done, like send an email or make a phone call or just go get a glass of water or go to the bathroom for God's sake, right? But yeah, there's that, and it can be very impactful in terms of how they're present, listening, relationships. And what also comes to mind is so I have a lot of my own techniques, but I'm also a certified heart math facilitator. And so I
Use
have
that.
some techniques that I use, yeah, to help people get present using the science of the heart. And there's a technique that I do with some clients at the beginning of our sessions to get fully present so that both of us aren't bringing in, where we were or what we were doing before, and we can just be present with one another.
Well, let's dig into that in a minute. And for those who don't know, I'm Scott. I've been a love coach and a transformational trainer for about 15 years. And yeah, I've been studying to be a better lover and to be a better communicator and so forth for about 30 years. So yeah, I'm deeply involved in this work. I'm here in Austin, Texas. Where are you based out of?
Me?
Yeah, where are you based out of?
California. Yeah, well, California,
California.
but I spend a lot of time in Mexico.
These days we live in a global world. It looks like you froze just a little bit. You said you got a storm going on, so if that interrupts us, then know that it's
Yes. So I
nature.
hope you don't lose me. But yeah, if I disappear, unfortunately, there's a big tropical storm, electrical storm coming in, and I'll pray that I don't lose electricity. We'll see what happens.
Got it. And if you're listening, stay tuned but for a gift that we'll be giving in 20 minutes or less. So, like, yeah, let's just start. So, heart math. Tell me, like, what is the technique that you tend to do for people to prep them before having conversation?
Yeah. Well, so I have like 9 techniques that I am certified in. But the one that I use most often for us to get present, which really only takes 2 minutes, it's called the shift and lift. And let me just quickly share too that in terms of the science of the heart. So when I've always been a geek about brain science, but I knew that in essence we had 3 brains. So we've got our heart brain, and we have our gut brain, right? But there's actual science behind the heart, and through heartmath.org, who's been around for over 20 years, they've done a lot of research on that. So one of the things that I was fascinated by is that there's more information travels from our heart to our brain than from our brain to our heart, which that just blew me away. And proof of that is, so, as you probably also in some ways talk about energy, and I talk a lot about frequency, and we are light, we are frequency, right? So they can measure electromagnetic frequency out from our heart, outside of our body, by about 3 feet, even though they know it goes beyond that. Whereas when they measure the electromagnetic frequency out from our brain, when we think thoughts, they can only measure it by about an inch.
Wow.
So
Cool.
that
Yeah,
stark difference. Yeah.
I've been
Go
working
ahead.
more with Dr. Joe Dispenza, which also is all about the science of
Mhm.
healing and how we can. He's actually got studies going on right now that show that meditation can be more effective than medication for like 60 different illnesses, and you can do even remote healing and so forth. It's pretty wild. Like the metaphysics, science, and studies are showing and proving that what the mystics of old for thousands of years have known and so forth. So when we talk about energy and moving energy, it's very real. It can be measured. This is not,
Yeah.
make believe or woo woo. It's science, and we're just barely starting to
Yeah.
understand this stuff. So cool. So
Yeah.
tell us this lift. Was it the technique lift
The
and
shift and lift.
shift
Yeah.
and lift? Love
So
it.
the first step, yeah. So the first step is heart focused breathing. And I'll actually talk us through it if you'd like.
Yeah.
And this step in and of itself is just its own quick technique. So if somebody just did heart focused breathing, that would also help with how someone is feeling, their mental state, how they're showing up, and getting present. So heart focused breathing is simply focus your attention in the area of the heart. Imagine the breath is flowing in and out of your heart or chest area, breathing a little slower and deeper than usual, and find an easy rhythm that's comfortable. And so you just do that, the way I walk people through it is do that for about a minute. So just breathe through your heart or your chest area.
Doing it
And then
as
the
you tell me.
second step, yeah. The second step is, and this, I love this. So while you're doing heart focused breathing, is activate feelings of kindness, appreciation, genuine connection, or an attitude of deep listening. And then I do that with the client for about 30 seconds. And then the
How do you
last
know which one
step,
of those to pick,
yeah, go ahead.
or do you do them all? You just
Just think
four
of all
things
of them
there.
in your own way.
All of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So kindness, appreciation, genuine connection, or an attitude of deep listening. So ScottieO, I'll share with you how I use this when I'm doing this with clients is, well, first I use the heart focused breathing to just get present and let go of whatever I came to the table with. And then that second step of activating feelings of kindness, appreciation, I just think of all the people that I've been connected to that day, anybody else I'm going to be connected to that day, that I exude kindness and appreciation to those individuals for various reasons, right? And then the genuine connection or an attitude of deep listening, the way I do it is, and there's no right way of doing it, by the way, or no wrong way, I should say, of doing this, is I literally, as I'm doing heart focused breathing, think of how I can genuinely connect with this person And so I have that attitude of deep listening. So I know how to help them that day in that session that we're about to do. So that's how I use that step 2 in that moment with the client. And then the third step is radiate these heart qualities to raise your vibration and help lift the energy field environment that surrounds you. So then what I imagine is that I'm radiating these things out to, say, my next door neighbors or other people in the town that I'm in. And I'm radiating to the person that I'm working with, even virtually. Because as you were saying, Joe Dispenza talks about how you can affect people globally. And so to help raise a person's or uplift, right? That's why it's called the shift and lift, to uplift the energy, the vibration, and that has an impact on other people. And so the fact that our electromagnetic frequency actually exudes out from our body by a couple feet, imagine purposely radiating that out to however far you want to go. So that's how I think about it, but there's no wrong way of doing it.
Yeah, and when you do that, from my perspective, the energy entrains other energies, and so it actually helps uplift their hearts, puts them in a heart-based space, and it gets people out of their head. I mean, the flip side of that is sometimes, let's say in a relationship, someone says or does something that triggers you, or like hits a hot button that like I call circle traps, like repeats an old story or an old program that it's like a limiting conversation in your subconscious, which controls 95% of our actions and feelings. And then I'm upset, right? So then often what happens if I'm upset is I'll like, well, you triggered me, I'm going to trigger you. And then you do something, and this is like subconscious, right? But I mean, you could probably relate if you've ever been in a relationship, especially in a romantic one. And then they get triggered, and they're spinning out, and then you're like in this what I call a trigger tornado, and neither of you is listening, and both of you are upset, and just make things worse, right? So it's like, um, so one of the things I like to do too is, if you've got to practice awareness or witness consciousness and like being present. So one of the things we do is just in general, just day to day, that make this a habit. Practice fully experiencing your experience while also noticing what's going on. So it's kind of like when you're eating your food, like noticing, oh, what does it taste like? Enjoying. Plus, it just makes life more rich, when you're actually present with what's going on. And then when you're talking to someone, not just focus on what am I saying and what I'm going to say next, but listening to what they're saying and noticing what's going on in my body. Like, do I have an emotional reaction, or old stories coming up? Like, and so that I'm multi-aware of what's going on. And that way, if I do get upset or triggered, instead of just being an automatic, I can go, oh, wait, I just noticed I'm getting upset, but I'm really committed to love, not being right. So then I can like shift and create a different result. Because it's really kind of crazy, like how much we are an automatic and don't even know about it. Like 95% of the time, they've done studies that shows that our thoughts and actions are the repetition of everything we did yesterday, which comes from our parents, which comes from their parents, which comes. So it's like waking up, and like this, the process of enlightenment, what you call it, is really just getting off our automatic programming and actually choosing for real and be having freedom of what we want. And so what you're talking about too is that you're also just like, I don't know, like juicing the heart or something before you even get into that conversation, which in that space you're already getting out of your head. You're less likely to be triggered, or upset, if you're coming from a heart space. And so I can only imagine that all relationships work better. And I assume this works in the business as well as in your love life, correct?
Correct. Yeah. In fact, the people that I work with are leaders, senior leaders, whether they're an entrepreneur or they're in say, a big box construction company. So, like I'm working with a director at a cement company that's global. He's been there for 20 years. And what's really funny is there was this, I introduced this to him at the beginning of our engagement. I've been working, it'll be a 6-month engagement. And there was this one session where we did it. And then he said to me, I just have to tell you, in our last session, you forgot to do the shift and lift with me. And I really missed that. I was like, I'm so sorry. I didn't even realize that I didn't initiate that with you at the beginning of the session. And then I reminded him and I said, by the way, you don't have to wait to do this with me. You can do this on your own. And you know what was funny is he turned around, picked up the printed out paper of the handout, and he showed it to me. And I said, okay, fair enough. See, you can do this on your own. And I said, and I'm so glad you told me that, because that's really great feedback that this is something that you love to do to kick us off in our sessions. So, you would never imagine, a very kind of male dominated industry or profession
Right.
would love doing stuff like this just to get present.
Works for a CEO of a cement truck company, then it'll work for you, right? So in fact,
Yeah.
it might be more useful in that area because this thing. I mean, if we come from our hearts, it sets us apart from those who don't, and so I can see how it's like almost a competitive advantage, and it is certainly where I want to come from with everyone, really. I like but especially my friends and lovers and so forth, because it's it's a juicier, richer experience to come from your heart, and I believe that communication is really key. If in my experience, most problems are resolved through communication, just because people don't really fully understand each other. And so if you can communicate it and you understand the other person's coming from, you have empathy, compassion, and so forth, then you can usually resolve most things. It's like, and the cool thing about energy that we're talking about here is that it's a transmutation, or it transmutes communication. It's like you can actually learn things directly from people's energetic fields. Like they say that when we're communicating, words are actually like 5%, and then like 13% is your intonation, how you say it, but like your body language and your energetic language is like over 80% of it. And I can understand through energy things that I have no other way of understanding, and it actually can transmute even over Zoom. Like you can, like they've done studies where you can experience the energetic connections over long distances too. Energy is not bound by time and space the way we tend to think our physical reality is. So yeah.
I
So
used to
what
think
about
that it
communication?
was
Any
too. Yeah.
suggestions? Sorry, go ahead. I'm talking. What'd you say?
No, yeah. I was agreeing with you that, I used to think that way too about the virtual world. And yet, over the past few years, when a lot of things went more virtual, I had to be open to that. And I'm realizing I can be just as effective. I mean, yes, being in person with people, hands down, is a totally next level experience, but I can be very effective and really connect with people virtually just as well. Yeah.
All right.
Did
So
you
the title
were
is
would you were asking me?
yeah. So our topic is relationship repair and revitalization. So
Yeah.
what would you say to someone who, let's say, they have a hurt relationship or damaged relationship in some form or fashion, whether it's business or romance or family or whatever? What would you suggest on how to start repairing that?
Well, coaching, hands down, a lot of it has to do with self-awareness. So, being aware of what is that relationship? How is that relationship important to you? And, sometimes in the work world, those relationships can be more tactical, practical, or transactional. So at the same time, it doesn't mean we don't have to be uncaring. In fact, trust gets built on teams and between, say, a leader and the people that report to that leader, when there is a higher level of trust, and communication and listening and everything that we're talking about very much has its place in that. I have another example of a client I was coaching, and they shared with me that this person, who they're in a department sort of next to them, and they always had a good relationship. They'd worked together for years. All of a sudden, this person started showing up differently, and they couldn't understand what was going on. And so I gave them some tips and some suggestions on how to open a dialogue with that person to really find out like what kinds of questions to ask and put himself out there. Because here's the question I asked him. I said, what's more important to you, the process or the relationship?
Mm,
And he
yeah.
said, the relationship. And I said, okay, it doesn't mean that process isn't important. but it depends on, where are you putting it? And sometimes it means if the process is not life or death, if it's not like a hardcore policy that has to be followed in a very particular way, say within a specific area, then really evaluate like what's more important to you. And to him, he said, no, the relationship is more important. And here's what's really cool, so ScottieO, is so he attempted to address it with this person, and it didn't go well. So then we talked about it after, and I just acknowledged him for making the effort. And he said, I did what I could do, and that was it. Well, this person came back. She needed more time to think about it and process it, which kind of tells you also, I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that too, that no matter the relationship, sometimes people need a little bit more time to process. And so she did, and she really thought about it. And then she contacted him and said, can I talk to you? And she brought it up again. And all of a sudden the calls that they had before that she ended up canceling, she put back on the calendar. So it totally transformed their relationship. And I said, whatever you did in that conversation, even though in the moment she wasn't ready, it had an impact. And she thought about it afterwards, and then she came back and it repaired the relationship.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and I'm a big fan. So the first step is like awareness of what's going on. The second step, well, I'd say would be responsibility. Like it's responsibility kind of gets a bad rep in our culture. It's like, oh, I don't want the blame or the guilt or the shame. And it's like that's nothing to do with responsibility. Like I would say that actually those things get in the way of responsibility. So it's like, so what I mean is like in nonviolent communication, it's like that being responsible for my upset. I would say something like, well, when you did X, Y, Z, I felt X, Y, Z, right? So versus saying you did this to me or you're an asshole or whatever, we tend to do sometimes. It's like, no, I'm the one who's upset. It's I'm triggered based on my past, my relationships, my history that really has nothing to do with the person. And that's most of our triggers come from this 95% thing. So being responsible for my trigger, that's okay. So if I'm upset, I'd go blow it off some steam before I talk to the person, right? Like you're talking about. It's like it's important to come from a space of non-triggeredness to where you communicate. And there's a variety of what I call emotional release processes you can do to go do that. It could be as easy as like just take a walk around the block before you come back, or like while you're driving, scream in your car, like scream in a pillow, or you could do things like scream in your hand and shake your body, or there's a whole range of things you could do to like get the emotions out. And what you're doing is you're just clearing out old stuff, old emotions. I say you got to feel to heal, know it's not real. The key is knowing that it's old stuff, not reinforcing old belief patterns, and because that you could re-traumatize yourself if you think it's true. But if it's like, so someone says something like, no one's ever going to love you, and my story is, oh, I'm unlovable, that might trigger me. And so I'm like, no, I'm lovable. I'm just releasing, when I asked a girl out and she laughed at me in middle school, or I'm releasing my story when I was a kid. And because when these things happen, these traumas in our body, they get stuck as energy. So you get to release all that. And this is just part of the process. And when you got all your old stuff out, then you're a clear channel, then you can be present and so forth with what's really going on. What's your thoughts
Yeah.
on what I said so far?
Well, it's interesting that you say the trauma of feeling unlovable. I went through a breakup in my early 20s that I walked away from that relationship with that story, that narrative. And
Me
it took
too.
me a long time to heal that. And what's really fascinating is when I finally healed that, I noticed that all of my relationships transformed
Yes.
with friendship, with some family members. So right, because I had to let that go and really understand where that came from. And do I want to, like you said, like carry that forward with me? It's like no. And realize no, I am lovable, I am loved, I am love. Like that's pretty
Yeah.
profound, right? And so and then when you realize that, how does that show up in all of your relationships? And believe it or not, like I this is a really cool conversation to have, because it's like we're talking about two different worlds that sometimes don't meet, yet
Mm.
the same stuff can show up, right? So like these kinds of triggers, how does that show up for somebody, say, in a work environment where if somebody on the team said one thing or looked at them in a particular way and it reminded them or triggered them of that past experience, all of a sudden, all those emotions come up and now they start engaging with that individual based on a past relationship that has nothing to do with them, right? You know, it's what if that person was just having a bad day or they were just processing and they weren't ready to say something in that moment, or they didn't even look at you, they looked at somebody beyond you, but you can't see them because your head is not turned in that direction. It's, I mean, it could be that, you know, that kind of like unclear environment and where people are creating all kinds of interpretations and perceptions that can impact
I
work
love this.
relationships.
I love this conversation. Can we chat for a few more minutes? I got a few other things I want to share before we go.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, this is so important because I think you hit the nail on the head. The best way to improve all your relationships is just love yourself. The more we can love ourselves, when we shift what's going on internally, the external world magically shifts. That's really the key. Because then if someone says something or does something that would normally trigger me, if I really love myself, I know it's not true, it's not going to trigger me. Like if someone calls me a green alien, I'm going to go, cool, But if someone said, no one's ever going to love you, and I had that unlovable trigger, I was like, that's, I might be reaction. And what resists persists. So even if it's like, no, that's not true at all, notice that if that's coming up, because if there's an energy with it, then there's probably an old story it's not true, but there might be an old story that's coming with it. And so the other thing I want to say is that when you are repairing relationships, a big key is to come from forgiveness. It's like, and a
yeah.
lot of people said that person, what they did to me, I'm never going to forgive them. And you're like resentment, right? But resentment is like drinking poison while you're waiting for them to die, and they don't
I
even
say
notice.
this all the time. I use that exact saying. I'll say resentment or anger is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. I say that all the time. I love that you just brought that up. Yeah.
Yeah, and the forgiveness isn't for them, it's for me, or for the person that's
Yeah.
doing the forgiveness, because it frees us of that all that stuck energy. And like the person might have done something bad to you once, but by having resentment, you're doing it to yourself emotionally and physically, like in your body over and over and over again. But where if you just forgive them, it's like, I'm free. I don't have to like think about that. I don't have to have that energy anymore. And part of that is acceptance, like, and acceptance doesn't mean what they did is okay. It doesn't mean
Yes.
that it's not going to protect you in
Right.
the future. It just means you're allowing what was, like,
Ah,
and usually I found that I have to forgive, then I have to come to acceptance, and then I potentially can come to love, and that's where I want to be, is like unconditionally love everyone all the time. And it's practice, right? And so
yeah.
that space is important too, because if I'm responsible for the relationship, and that's the thing too, if I'm coming from responsibility, then I'm gonna it's not my it's forget about fault, forget about all that. It's like, just what am I committed
Yes.
to, and I'm gonna own my part or my miscommunication or whatever to help heal the space. And so, because that's what I'm committed to, is relationship. And you got to have that come from before you're able to have real communication and clarity. And then when I do something like nonviolent communication, or Imago is another great process we won't have time to do, but check it out, IMAGO. It's a
Ooh, I
way
don't
to
know what
communicate.
about that. Yeah.
I'll do, maybe we have time, I'll give you a quick sec. But and then when you're
Yeah.
communicating, then you can ask for requests, like, what do you want to have moving forward? So you're redefining the relationship. What do you want to add to that,
You just,
if anything?
you said so much there. Yeah. I know that was, it's like, God, where do I even, you know,
Well, I can jump in what Imago is, since you asked. So
yeah,
Imago,
yeah.
it's kind of like, first of all, I'm sharing, and then the other person's listening, and they're just listening. They're not interrupting. They're actually, and then they repeat back what I say. So you do it in
Ah,
chunks. So the first goal is to feel heard. The second goal is empathy. So after I share everything I want, and you're just listening and repeating, and I say I'm complete, then and you can also ask clarity questions like, is there more? Is that correct? And then you would say,
Mm.
I imagine you must feel, and then you bring empathy and you actually feel what you imagine they must feel and show
Ah,
them that you care. And then I go, yeah, yeah, I felt that, or this is what I didn't feel. And then it goes back to me, and then I say, well, my requests are. And then you switch, and then you have the other person's perspective, but it's a structure that kind of takes you out of like, you said, she said, and the trigger tornado thing. And it can be really effective when you are in a triggered space. And I also can, facilitate. If people are really upset, having a facilitator or a third person that understands how to do that and help you walk through that can be really useful to get some
yeah,
to make a difference in the relationship. Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah, to create a real clearing. Yeah,
yeah, it's a clearing. Yeah. And you have to clear the past. You
the
got to
clearing.
pull the poop out of the soup before you keep drinking. You got to, it's like, you can't
Fine.
just ignore what's
Again,
there.
yeah. So much of this, it's like it doesn't matter what world it's in, it translates over, right? Like in the work world or in corporate, like there's often the saying of like making sure that all voices are heard,
Oh yeah.
right? So how do you do that? How do you create a psychologically safe space?
Mm.
And the responsibility that's on the leader to do that, as well as the people on the team can also take ownership in creating that for themselves and each other. And in some of the workshops I do, because I coach people one-to-one, I also work with teams. Sometimes we'll actually have a dialogue just about trust. Like,
Mm.
what does that mean to you? How do you know it's present? How do you know it's not present? Do you believe that it can be given, or do you believe that it has to be earned? And really hear that question. It's a belief, right? It's
Mm.
all these things, right? How does that take shape or show up on your team? And talking about elephants in the room and having difficult conversations and really problem solving. Talk about communication. That takes things to a whole new level. So those are some of my favorite things to facilitate on and coach on.
Yeah, so along those same lines, integrity is something you don't really think of that's important in relationships, but it's vital for trust, right? Like, if you can't do what you say you're going to do, then and you lie or destroy trust, that's one of the biggest killers of relationship. And it's in the little things too, like showing up on time, and if you say you're going to take out the trash, take out the trash. Like, could be, and it works in personal relationships. It certainly works in big containers. I just finished a big container weekend too, and it's
Yes, you
if you
did,
have to
yeah.
establish integrity at the get go, and you have to walk your talk, or or people aren't going to trust and allow themselves to be in their emotions, even be in a safe space. So the tighter the container you have, where people can trust it, then the freer they are to let go, to feel, to open up, in within that space. And I want to mention one other thing I thought was funny is like you got to check assumptions too. Like most of the time, we're operating automatic
Ooh,
and we think that our assumptions equal reality. Our interpretation is what it is. But like there was one study that showed 80% of the time, or wasn't 80% of the time, our interpretations are completely off. And so we
yep.
are interacting with our assumptions or our false interpretations of the thing versus the reality. That's why communication is so key. Once I had a couple of roommates that I thought we were like making best friends ever. And then one day we were like renting out our rooms, whatever. And then one day the guy said, well, we're out of here. And I was like, what? It said, yeah, we're leaving. You obviously don't like us here. So we're gone. He just closed the door and left. I'm like, what the heck? I was completely confused. And then in text messages, which is not a good way to communicate about this stuff, he wrote back that he says,
No.
well, every time you went to your room, you slammed the door and you were obviously angry and upset with us. And I was like, what is he talking about? And then I realized that we had like a door that was like stuck because the jam wasn't kind of lined up.
Oh,
So when
yeah.
we had to shut the door, it would, make a kind of a slamming sound if we wanted to actually close it. And they just interpreted that as we were pissed at them and weren't talking to them. And they never
See?
asked us if we're angry. And they completely
Um,
made all the stories and it ended the relationship. And we never even had a chance to talk about it. So it's like that kind of craziness happens all the time in the real world. But
all
you
the
want to share something about
time,
that?
all the time. Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. It's just stuff like that fascinates me. It's just, and I think so everybody has their own level of communication that they're comfortable with. Some people say a lot. Some people are very quiet. And then some of those quiet people will feel like they're over communicating. And I sometimes will say, depending on who you're interacting with, sometimes you can't over communicate. In fact, you still might not be saying enough. You still might not be explaining enough. You can ask somebody, is this enough for you? Do you want more information? That's also part of communication. And I also want to go back to what you said about assumptions. So one of my philosophies that I share with people often is assumptions are dangerous. As simple as that. So I walk around thinking to myself, assumptions are dangerous. So knowing that, if I don't want to make any assumptions, I get curious. It makes me automatically curious. And that's where I encourage being inquisitive, being inquiry, asking questions. And that helps with creating, building or deepening relationships, building trust, improving communication, so yeah.
So when you assume, it makes an ass out of you and me, was one of the things I assume.
Right.
But
yeah.
yeah, I was going to say something else, but I forget. Okay, so we're kind of wrapping up on time. Anything else you want to leave people with? Any last thoughts or suggestions? Or how to get in contact with you?
Yes. Yes. Well, first, what comes to mind is, look, if a relationship is important to you on any level, even at work, sometimes you have to really evaluate the importance of a relationship. You don't have to like them, but if you need to work with someone closely for productivity or to get work done, you got to really take a look at that. But, it's never too late. It's never too late. If you can catch yourself, first of all, if you can prevent it from happening, creating distrust or tension, right? Do what you can. In the moment, if you can catch yourself, put a pause on it and say, hey, wait a second, this is not how I want to show up right now. And I want to pivot. If it's after the fact, it's never too late to go back and clean it up or fix it, no matter the relationship, even at work. So I just want to leave people with that. And if anybody's curious to contact me, where'd you go? Oh, there you are. My domain name is ilovemylife.com, but there's dashes in between each word. So it's I-love, L-O-V-E -my-life.com. I have a free ebook. It's not about relationship repair, but it is about procrastination. So if anybody struggles with that, I have a great ebook that they can download from my website. Or if they're curious about anything I've talked about and you want to have a complimentary strategy session, let's talk.
Awesome. Yeah, and my website is Ecstatic Hearts. And if you want to do a free 30-minute consultation with me on how I can improve your love life, we didn't really get a chance to get into revitalization, but there's all sorts of amazing things you can do to keep your relationship juicy and new and fun and exciting. Maybe we'll do another video on that. But that's it's Calendly, so I'll just type it in, but calendly.com/ecstatic hearts, ECSTAITIC, ecstatic hearts, HEARTS. I think I said that right. I'll put it into the chat. You want to put yours in the chat too, just in case?
Yeah, I'll put it. Where is the chat? There it is. Okay.
.com. So people can copy and paste it if they have it. /
I don't think I have access to the chat that you have, so I'm putting it in the Zoom chat.
Yeah, Zoom chat. That's one. Yep.
Oh, there we go.
There.
Okay.
So check out the chat. And yeah, well, if we post it later, we can just put that into the comments underneath. So sweet. Well, it's been a joy chatting with you. It's like we haven't really even had the chance to go in a conversation like this yet. So it's like we're more aligned than I realized, and we're doing the same kind of stuff. And so it all starts with love. That's the answer for me. And and I appreciate you taking the time to help spread some more love in the world and help us get our relationships vital and revitalized. So
I love it. Thanks for this time.
Right.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much. And thank you for listening. Any more folks out there. All right. Bye-bye. Have a good one.